arrive at Singapore Air Terminal, will all transit passengers please alight from the aircraft first, and will you all please have your passports ready? You will be through the airport formalities very quickly. We will be waiting to take you to your hotel.
Thank you, madam. So you're going on to Australia tomorrow?
Mr. Brentford, please call at Airway office. A friend is waiting there.
Staying a week, sir? Hope you have a good time. Can't fail in Singapore. Thank you very much. Would you please go through this way?
All done, and our passengers are away. Some to spend the night and fly away tomorrow. Some to stay because Singapore is their home. But some on business or pleasure who can spend a while to explore this teeming, varied island. At first it looks like any other eastern city. But if you're used to eastern cities, you'll notice how clean this one is. Then you'll discover it's unique. Because here, all the crush and tumble of the East are found side by side with luxurious living. For here are open spaces, fine buildings, and orderly traffic.
Oh, yes. Singapore. That eastern city with luxurious living. Quite remarkable, that, no? You know, when you see a video like that, 1957 travel video about Singapore, there's something about it. You can just feel this kind of colonial condescension. There's just something wrong about it. And it's so easy for us to just have this kind of knee-jerk reaction where we go, oh, those terrible Westerners, they colonized the world, they've come up with this discourse to try to dominate the world. It's just evil. Well, that may be true, but the interesting thing is that at the same time that the British were making travel videos like that one, the Chinese, or certain Chinese, were doing the exact same thing. In 1949, the communists took over mainland China, and much of the movie industry from Shanghai relocated to Hong Kong. Hong Kong already had a movie industry. They were producing a lot of movies in Cantonese, but with the arrival of these people from Shanghai, they started to produce Mandarin language movies as well. That's great, but Hong Kong's a tiny place, and if you have all of these people making movies, then it's going to be hard to market them. So just as this happened, the movie industry in Hong Kong turned to Southeast Asia and said, we've got to market our films to the Chinese who are in Southeast Asia. There's a problem, though. The Chinese in Southeast Asia were weird. They wore these different kinds of clothes. The main group there, or the most prominent group, a group known as the Straits Chinese or the Peranakan, a lot of them were intermarried with local women. They spoke English more than they spoke Chinese, and the Chinese that they spoke was this weird mix of Hokkien and Malay. So they were definitely strange by Chinese standards. Nonetheless, the Chinese wanted them to watch Chinese films, so they figured out the best way to do this would be to make films about the Chinese in Southeast Asia. The only problem is they also wanted Chinese in Hong Kong, some of whom were from Hong Kong, but many now who had fled there from the mainland after the communists took over. They wanted them to watch these movies too. So if they showed these kind of weird people who wore strange clothing and spoke this weird language, that would not work either. So what they essentially did was to kind of present the Chinese in Southeast Asia, but to simplify them, to make them feel safe, or look safe to outsiders, and to make them look the same as other Chinese. Very similar to the way that the British in that film that we saw just now tried to show that Singapore, yeah, it's different, but don't worry about it because there are open spaces and good traffic. You can relax and enjoy luxurious living. So in the 1950s, there were many movies that were made by Hong Kong studios, both about Chinese in Southeast Asia and in Southeast Asia. One of the earliest was called The Belle of Penang, and it was a Cantonese film, and it was filmed both in Penang as well in Singapore. In the movie, you see some scenes in which the main character, the Belle or the Beauty of Penang, is dressed in Peranakan clothing, but for the most part, you won't find much difference between the Chinese in Penang and those in Hong Kong, and that was the main point. So the gist of the story is that there is a singer in Penang, the Belle of Penang, and there's a school teacher who falls in love with her. The school teacher and this woman decide to live together, which at the time was acceptable. As people at that time would put an advertisement in the newspaper or an announcement saying we are living together, and it was a way to publicly say that we are married. So these two start living together, they think everything is great, but then the principal at the school learns that one of his teachers is living with a singer. Oh, that's bad, because singers were thought to be pretty kind of unsavory, morally low, people with low morals. And so he fires the teacher. The teacher tries to persevere, but he doesn't have a job. He gets sick. Things go from bad to worse. And finally, the teacher's mother realizes that he's living with a singer, and she goes there and basically tells the woman, please leave, because I'm only going to give this guy help once you do that. So the mother gets this singer out of her son's life. She tries to bring him to doctors to get him healthy, but all this time the singer still remains loyal to the teacher. She continues to help him, and eventually the mother figures this out and more or less accepts the fact that this singer, even though she is a singer, is a morally upright woman, and that her son and this woman deserve to marry each other, and the final scene is of the two getting married. So it's a very interesting drama, which basically takes the diversity or the difference of the Chinese in Southeast Asia and more or less erases that, so that Chinese in Hong Kong can watch this movie. But by filming the Chinese in Southeast Asia, they're also hoping that the Chinese in Southeast Asia will watch this movie as well. So there's a money logic behind this. And in many ways, that's also what's going on in the British travel video there as well, a money logic. They want British citizens to go to Singapore for work, for pleasure, spend money, support the empire. Don't worry that the things are strange there, because you can still live your luxurious life. So all of this sounds pretty kind of depressing and serious. And of course, that wasn't the case, because even under colonial rule, people still had a good time. The British, of course, had a good time, but even the colonized had a good time. And in this case, we know that the Chinese did as well, because in this movie, The Belle of Penang, there's a great song that became a classic. And I'm sure that if we could enter a dance hall in the Chinese areas of Singapore or Penang or other places of Malaya, we would hear this song playing back in the 1950s, and people would have a good time.
But perhaps it's at night that this polyglot city comes most alive. When the lights come up, there is every kind of entertainment to tempt you out, and every style of eating and dancing. To dancing, there's much to be learned. There are Western dance halls, but the Malay dance or rongeng has an appeal quite different. No, not that way. You must learn not to touch. That's it.